When it comes to the 2024 NFL Draft, pretty much everybody's talking about a few select players. You have guys such as Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, and Bo Nix. Those 6 quarterbacks are routinely talked about as future franchise players, or at least have the potential to do so. There is one guy though who is slowly flying up draft boards, slowly is becoming a bigger name, and honestly could play his way into that first group. His name is Michael Pratt. He's the best kept quarterback secret in this year's draft class, as Pratt had an extremely decorated career at Tulane, has all the mental intangibles to be a good NFL quarterback, and pretty much has everything going for him. There are a few areas of concern that could keep him out of the first round, but Michael Pratt could be a future franchise quarterback, and right now he's a hidden gem that to some is in plain sight. In today's video, I want to introduce you to who Michael Pratt is. We're going to talk about how he went from a recruit with just 3 FBS offers to a guy who built Tulane into a winning program, and now could be off to the NFL after rewriting the record books. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what prospect or quarterback I could cover next for 2024. Now, let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Michael Pratt. In order to understand how Pratt got to this point, we first need to go back in time. He grew up in the Sunshine State of Florida, and Pratt always loved being outdoors and actually grew up in a baseball family. He said, quote, "I think from a young age, I knew I wanted to play sports in general and at a professional level, whether that was basketball, baseball, or football." Funny enough, Michael Pratt actually never played football or attended school until 9th grade. He ended up being homeschooled for most of his life, but when it came to high school, he was ready to shine. He was also anything but sheltered. There's a stigma around homeschooled kids, but apparently he was not sheltered at all and was an extreme go-getter. The first thing he'd have to do is convince his parents to actually let him play football, as baseball had consumed his life to that point, and there were some worries about him playing football. He still insists that he's a better baseball player than he ever was at football, but he grew weary of the sport and wanted a change in scenery. Interestingly enough, he finally got to make the switch to football when his dad moved to Virginia to go to law school at 54 years old. He got to play football, and it was a ball and glove fit with it. He started out at Boca Raton High School and said, quote, "I fell in love with football my freshman year, and I mainly grew up playing basketball and baseball, and even though I never played football until 9th grade, that first practice of my freshman year was the moment I fell in love with the game. I love being around the guys and the competitive nature of the sport. Getting to compete on the football field with them is what really started my passion." A big moment for Pratt was his freshman season, as after playing on JV all year, he got moved up to varsity. He got a chance to play a few varsity games that season, and that is when everyone knew Michael Pratt had a future. His sophomore year he started, and as a junior he would eventually break out. He completed 53% of his passes, throwing for 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. He also ran for nearly 500 yards and 3 scores, and led the Bobcats to a 5-5 record. He also impressed at camps, and was starting to get FBS interest. It was low major to be honest though, as he had 3 FBS offers and some Ivy League offers. Eventually he decided to visit Tulane, Florida Atlantic, and Toledo, and then chose to go with the Green Wave. This was a huge get for head coach Willie Fritz, and Tulane was coming off their first bowl appearance since 2013 when he committed, so they'd have an opening for the starting job in 2020. But first Pratt wanted to get better and prepare for college, so he left his school to transfer. While many players like to transfer because of playing time, this was not the case for Pratt. Competition is exactly why he left, as he actually went and competed with another player who was a future Southern Miss commit, so he wanted to earn his spot rather than be given it. He wanted to be tested in practice, and that is exactly what would end up happening. He said, quote, "I wanted to go somewhere where there was another good quarterback, where I'd have to go 110% each and every single day at practice, and it really played out well for me. Honestly, I kind of feel bad for that Southern Miss guy." Pratt said he was not scared by the idea of entering a quarterback battle, or even being a backup, and that, quote, "Once I get to college, there's going to be 4 or 5 other quarterbacks over there, and I'm going to have to learn to beat them out." With Deerfield Beach, he was paired with one of the top running backs in the country in Jalen Knighton, but it wasn't all good news for Pratt, as while he was in Nashville, Tennessee watching his sister play basketball, there was a terrible moment that rocked the football world. His teammate Bryce Gowdy had been hit by a freight train, and this had a huge effect on him. Gowdy was a wide receiver who was signed to play for Georgia Tech, and was supposed to report to Atlanta just a few weeks later. This happened to be Pratt's best friend at Deerfield Beach, and it was absolutely devastating. I'm sure that had a very difficult effect on the Pratt family and everybody involved, and that story is really sad. While it was awful, he would end up getting a tattoo to honor him, and Pratt would end up becoming a big deal later on. At first though, scouts really weren't floored by him. According to 24/7 Sports, Pratt was just a 3-star recruit, the number 47 pro-style quarterback, and the 1,364th best player in the class of 2020. So, how would Pratt do at Tulane? Well, let's take a look. When Pratt would arrive at Tulane, there was a little bit of hype to him, but by the time late September had rolled around, he was starting to become a big deal. He filled in for their senior Keon Howard in the first quarter and led them to a 66-24 victory. After that, Fritz had seen enough and decided in October of 2020 to make Michael Pratt the full-fledged starter. He wasn't even allowed to talk to reporters that week, so he could exclusively focus on his first career start. He became the 7th true freshman quarterback to start a game since 1975, and Pratt was a big deal. Although he put up decent numbers, he was not remarkable by any means. In total, he finished with 1,806 yards with 20 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Going into 2021, he'd once again be the starter, and notably had a huge game in Week 1 against Spencer Rattler in Oklahoma, where they nearly pulled off an upset. He ended up finishing his sophomore campaign with 2,300 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 8 picks. 2021 was extremely difficult as they only won 2 games, but then in 2022, he demonstrated his potential as he led Tulane from a 2-10 record to a 12-2 record. He ended up throwing for 3,010 yards with 27 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, while becoming one of the best group of 5 quarterbacks in the country. The peak of this came against Cincinnati, as after he threw a 30-yard touchdown pass to Deuce Watts, this would change everything. He ended up leading them to a 27-24 victory over the Bearcats, and they would host the American Athletic Conference Championship game for the first time in school history. The biggest game of his career at that point was when they played against USC, and he would duel it out with likely future #1 overall pick Caleb Williams. While Williams was extremely impressive in that game, people also couldn't help but notice Michael Pratt was solid too. He ended up throwing for 234 yards and 2 touchdowns, and nearly ran for 100 yards on the ground as well. They ended up beating number 10 USC 46-45, and he would finish the 2022 season with 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 5 picks, and he was second in passing efficiency behind Bryce Young. He was an extremely talented passer, and that's why there was a couple big-time programs that wanted him apparently. There were some rumors that Pratt would leave Tulane for his final year and transfer to a Power 5 school, but it would not end up happening. He decided to stick it out for one more year with the Green Wave, and there was some early Heisman buzz to Pratt, but that would not end up happening. His most notable game of the season would come against Ole Miss, and he didn't even get a chance to play because he was hurt. Man, I really wish we would have been able to see that game, but Pratt would finish the year pretty strong. He had 4 total touchdowns and a huge win over North Texas, and then he'd once again bring him back to the conference championship game as he'd score 2 touchdowns and a loss to SMU. In total for the season, Pratt would finish with 2,406 yards with 22 touchdowns and 5 picks with a top 50 QBR in the nation. While at first glance it seemed like Pratt somewhat regressed, he was injured for part of the season and he never fully looked comfortable. In total in his time at Tulane, he completed 61% of his passes, threw for 90 touchdowns, and made plays with his legs. In terms of his future in the NFL, he's currently a projected day 2 pick, and here's a couple pros and cons. His strengths include he has everything you're looking for in an ideal pocket passer, including his frame and size. He has the ability to make tight window throws, has good anticipation, has shown extremely good discipline and the ability to take care of the ball, and has decent athleticism. His downside includes he lacks elite arm strength and will need to get better at the deep ball. He needs to get the ball out quicker, lacks elite athleticism, and honestly will suffer from small school syndrome, as his level of competition at Tulane was a little bit different than an SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, or Power 5 guy. Overall though, Michael Pratt is a guy who could play his way into that second round, and maybe even be a top 5 quarterback from this year's draft class when it's all said and done. He could be that next NFL quarterback who goes completely unnoticed and then comes out of nowhere, but that's honestly going to depend on what situation he's in. If he has to start right away, I think he's doomed. If he gets a year or 2 to develop and then gets his opportunity, I think he could actually be pretty solid. Honestly though, my word doesn't really mean anything, and the consensus is that he'll probably be a 3rd round pick. We'll really have to wait and see, but Michael Pratt has a great story. He went from a guy with 3 FBS offers to the best quarterback in Tulane history, and now someone who could start at the next level. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but let me know what you guys think. What do you think of Michael Pratt? Does he have an NFL future? And what's another quarterback prospect who's being overlooked who I should cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.